Greetings YouTube, this is Boss Jinbei here, setting sail with you on yet another One Piece theory video. Today is going to be the first video in our Endgame series, where we will be taking a look at a character or group within the story and going over the most popular or likely scenarios for their story or what role they have to play as we approach the endgame of One Piece. First up in this series is going to be the Surgeon of Death, former warlord Trafalgar Law. Law has been an important character to the story even amongst the supernovas, ever since Sabaody and Marineford pre-timeskip. And while he has been far less in the forefront since Dressrosa ended, he still likely has a vital role to play in the story going forward. I can see three distinct scenarios or options for how Law's story can play out going into the end of One Piece, as well as one sleeper theory that I think is highly unlikely but still worth a mention. Scenario 1. Law remains an ally and helps the Straw Hats. I think that this is the least likely of the expected potential outcomes. As previously mentioned, Law has helped Luffy and been an ally to at least some degree since even pre-timeskip. He's a formidable fighter. He has an unusually powerful Devil Fruit that, when properly used, can be downright OP, and the ability to defeat Vice Admiral level opponents, something likely only Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and Jinbei can do amongst the Straw Hats and their main allies at this point. Law is a former warlord, and given Luffy's trend of creating allies of the former warlords like Boa, Jinbei, Kuma in a way, Crocodile for a bit, potentially Buggy, Law would fit right into that mix if he does remain an ally of Luffy going through Wano and into the endgame of One Piece. Even if he does remain an ally, I don't foresee him becoming a Straw Hat as some people do envision. Even ignoring the problem of Law's crew and their own individual goals, I don't think Oda will have another Will of D member on the Straw Hat crew besides Luffy. I also don't see Law becoming a member of the Grand Fleet with his crew, as some people think he could. If he does remain an ally going into the final war or wars that we see happening at the end of the series, I could see it being more like an inverse of how the Straw Hats allied themselves with Law during Dressrosa. The arc was primarily about fulfilling Law's goal to take down Doflamingo, and that kind of became the Straw Hats' goal as the story progressed. In a similar way, I could see Luffy needing to take down, say, Blackbeard or the world government, and Law being an active ally to assist the Straw Hats in those endeavors, without actually ever becoming, subservient to Luffy. I think Law just has too much pride as an individual and a captain, though. He's always planning, he cares deeply about his crew and wouldn't want to be using them, and he's repeatedly mentioned going after the One Piece himself and taking down the Emperors, goals that he seemed to have in conjunction with his revenge on Doflamingo and weren't just lip service. So I do think for those reasons that him remaining in this allied role that he currently is in Wano going into the endgame of One Piece, I think that is the least likely of the possible major scenarios for Law's role going forward. Next up is what is most likely the most popular theory regarding Law's future in the story, although it actually isn't my pick for what I actually think will occur. The general thought is that Law will sacrifice himself or somehow end up dying to help the Straw Hats and Luffy in particular. The two most popular or common threads of this theory are tied to Law's Devil Fruit, the Opi Opi no Mi or the Op Op Fruit, and the ability the fruit grants to perform the perennial youth operation. Many in the community think Law will perform this surgery either to save Luffy from a near-death situation when fighting Kaido, or that it can be performed in reverse to somehow kill Kaido, either to undo his seemingly natural immortality, or potentially because Kaido's immortality stems from a previous performance of the perennial youth operation. This scenario is similar to the first in that Law is allying with or helping the Straw Hats, except here it is to the ultimate degree or the utmost extent. I used to be a big subscriber to this theory, however, some things do give me pause about this scenario now due to recent happenings in the story, or I guess a lack of certain things happening within the story. Law's recent backseat in the story in Wano and his general lack of prominence so far makes me think that having either of these scenarios playing out in Wano is far less likely than we thought when we were leaving Dressrosa and then when we were starting Wano with Law as a character here. While I still cannot write this off from happening, I do think Law has too many story threads left to play out that won't be resolved in Wano. The two biggest being some further resolution with Dofi. I do not think we have seen the last of Doflamingo, and I do think there will be some type of future interaction with Law. What that may be, Oda may be willing to surprise us. Who knows? Doflamingo could even potentially end up being an ally in the final war. I mean, the story could go in a lot of different directions, but I do think that some future interaction between these two characters is going to be warranted in the story. The other major plot thread for Law is the mystery of the Will of D. And as the other main, quote-unquote good guy or ally character that we have had as a focal point for the story up to this point, I just don't see Law dying until we have some more information or resolution for what the D means. And I don't foresee a significant amount of information on that happening here in Wano. We haven't really had much setup for it, and that seems to be something that may be in a future arc, say Elbaf arc or Laugh Tale, or even maybe held until the final war. But regardless of when we actually do get more information on the Will of D, I don't see it happening anytime soon in Wano, and I don't see Law dying before we get some more information on that. Before moving on to the final most likely role Law has to play in the endgame of One Piece, I did want to briefly mention an out there theory that I don't think has much chance at all of being true, but would be a wild twist if so. And that would be the theory that Law is a secret member of SWORD, alongside Kobe, Drake, and we assume Kuzan? The general thought is that, like Drake and similarly to Corazon in the past, Law has been a SWORD member masquerading as a pirate. But unlike Drake, part of his task was to become a warlord and be an insider for that section of the Marines inside the Shichibukai. Part of the reason people think this could be the case is the reveal that Kobe is a member of SWORD and was also somehow involved in the Rocky Port incident, something we don't really know much about, but it was an incident that Law had a hand in that increased his infamy and helped him secure a spot as a warlord during the time skip. The adherents of this theory think that this incident may have been a setup to both bolster Kobe's position, I think he ended up getting a promotion after that, and also to help Law become a warlord in the process. Law also seemed to have some deeper connection or understanding with Drake on Sabaody, and many think Drake is the one who may have helped Law escape the prison in Rasetsu Town. This theory does have some pretty serious plot holes that are seemingly hard to reconcile. A main one being that many view SWORD as something Sengoku and likely Corazon would have been involved with, and yet Sengoku and Law seem to have no real deeper connection in that regards during their interaction post Dressrosa. Also, Law has directly harmed Marines and indirectly harmed Celestial Dragons, taking away one of their slaves, beating up and killing seemingly a number of Marines during the escape from Sabaody. Something that it would be hard to believe even an undercover Marine would be willing to do. Now, while this theory is a lot of fun and is I would say a good theory crafting exercise, I find it highly unlikely, and it would require, I think, a lot of explaining by Oda to make all the pieces really fit satisfactorily. My personal guess for Law's role post-Wano and into the endgame of One Piece is that he returns to being an active rival for Luffy, similarly to Kid. With all the talk of pirate alliances never ending well and always ending in betrayal, I can see the argument for Oda using that to show how things are different with Luffy. He often does portray Luffy as a quote-unquote good pirate or a good example of a pirate, or as being somehow different from most of the pirates we experience in the story. However, I can just as easily see him doing that and then having Kaido betray Orochi, the Big Mom Kaido alliance ending in betrayal, all of that to throw us off, and then later, maybe even post-Wano, have Law, in a way, betray the Straw Hats. Now, I don't think Law will betray them in that he would set them up to be killed by Kaido or something along those lines, turned into the world government, but I definitely think it's within Law's character to either copy the Straw Hats' poneglyph rubbings, or outright steal them, or steal the information on the translation, and then move on towards the remaining poneglyphs and Laugh Tale with his crew ahead of the Straw Hats. I'm not sure how he would or could read them or use them, I don't see him kidnapping Robin for this. I think that that's Blackbeard's move to make. I'm in that camp. But maybe he steals the info after Robin has translated them for the Alliance. As stated before, Law has multiple times mentioned his goal to obtain the One Piece and to become the Pirate King. And most in the community seem to have kind of written this off or not taken it super seriously, because Law has been presented as much more of an ally to Luffy for so long. But Law was introduced as a character equivalent to Luffy and Kid, and I really think post-Wano, Oda is going to return to a similar characterization for him. Law has his own unique view of the world and pirating, shaped by his own unique experiences, and he's just too clever and cunning a character to remain an ally to Luffy going into, the endgame. He would be a unique rival, one based on cleverness and cunning as opposed to just brute power. And him returning to being an active, friendly rival would create a new and unique dynamic for the story that we don't really have at this point. Now, this theory doesn't really preclude Law dying towards the end of the story. I could see him falling to Blackbeard at some point, or perhaps the storyline with his fruit plays out in a way involving Im-sama and the world government, and he maybe dies in some way related to that. But all of these scenarios I can see playing out with Law happening after returning to becoming a more independent player in the overall story. Oda seemed to have an initial characterization for Law, and then seemed to have expanded upon that and deviated to a degree with his individual storylines with Doflamingo and Dressrosa and Punk Hazard. However, I don't think Oda has made it clear that he has fully changed Law's character or foreclosed what those initial characterizations were for him. Another large reason for this is how Law has the will of D, and so far within the story we have not really seen any characters with the D work together for a long stretch or really allied together. They all seem to operate independently in many ways, outside of, say, Rouge and Roger, although their alliance was rather short-lived as well, and each seems to be working towards their own idea or view of freedom in some way. And I see Law and Luffy's relationship returning to a more rivalistic one in the future, although perhaps as friendly rivals. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. Does my reasoning make sense? What do you think Law's destiny is in the story as we get closer to the end of One Piece? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Remember to like the video, subscribe if you are new, and I will see you when we set sail for the next video.